Anon, Bongsap Central, Ria Ed, Melissa Guevara. Oh, yes, Marissa, I'll message you afterwards. To be honest, I did forget. I got the info, but so I'll message you. Jacqueline Phillips, Kathy Belfont, Dandy Sandiford. So let me jump back right into it again, folks. My apologies, but that's what happens when you have inconsiderate neighbors. Seriously. So I was making the point. Oh, loss. I was making the point about the Prime Minister's visit to Tobago and the difference in the reception that she would have received compared to what Dr. Rowley would have received. And so far, for the last 6 months, we have seen Mr. Augustine is going out of his way to be, overly receptive to Mrs. Prasad Bisesa. In the House, you would see that the two members of the two members who hold the Tobago seats sit on the government side of the aisle, and they vote along with the government on all matters. So while they may try to pretend as if they are not part of the coalition of interests, they're not fooling anybody. They're very much a part of the coalition of interests. And it's getting more and more difficult for them to be able to separate themselves or to continue to maintain that charade. Because it is clear, whatever, I wouldn't say what Tobago wants, what Fali wants, Kamala will give him. Because at the end of the day, the UNC's whole imperative with respect to that is to try and to see if it is that those two Tobago seats, if they could neutralize those two Tobago seats, because which they know at least one of those seats is critical to the People's National Movement getting back into office. So they would rather fight the PNM in Trinidad alone, where they believe that they have at least 18 solid seats or 19 solid seats. And so it's easier for them to win an election if the battle is fought in Trinidad alone, as opposed to if it's fought Trinidad and Tobago. So if they can give Fali and the TPP whatever it is that they need to ensure that they hold on to those two seats, because we recall what happened in 2010. The People's Partnership would have won those two seats through the Tobago People's Party with the Vanilla Allen Toppin and Delman Baker. And then 5 years later, in 2015, they lost those two seats to the People's National Movement. But the TPP is not the top, the Tobago organization of the people, right? And so let's give Fali whatever it is he wants, and then he could fight the battle in Tobago, because he has a solid footing with 14-1, and let me see. Yeah, so 14-1, and we have the THA election coming up very soon, and so we will see what the outcome of that will be. But ask yourself the question, why doesn't Fali just want to declare that the TPP is part of the coalition of interest? Because he knows that there are lots of persons in Tobago who support his party who will not take too kindly to such an accommodation, all right? Because while they may support the TPP, they do not necessarily support the UNC, right? And Kamala Prasad Bisesa has made it clear on numerous occasions that the UNC is not interested in contesting any seats in Tobago, because she's of the view that Tobago should be run and governed by Tobagonians alone. Okay, if that's your position. But I think some of the people who would have voted for the TPP would have expected that perhaps these two gentlemen may have found place in the government, perhaps as parliamentary secretaries, or because remember Watson Duke, when he was talking about if he were to win the two seats, he would be kingmaker, and therefore he would negotiate and he would be prime minister if it came down to the two Tobago seats. Unfortunately for poor Mr. Duke, that was not the case. He didn't do well in that election at all, and it's left to be seen how he's going to function with the upcoming THA election. I listened to his contribution to the private motion that was brought by the minority leader. I think it was on Thursday or Friday. And I noted that Mr. Duke went all out on the PNM, and he seemed to give his former colleagues, just a little tap on the wrist, But remember, Mr. Duke asked the Prime Minister a few months ago for a job. I don't know if she's responded to him as yet, and perhaps he's still hoping to get that job, such that he is willing to do like so many others, to bend the knee, as it were. And if it is that he is of the view that the government and the THA administration are in cahoots, well, hey, fall in line. Fall in line, as we see a lot of people are doing. But again, it was difficult for Dr. Rowley and the PNM to be able to navigate their way in Tobago with the TPP being in charge of the THA. And I don't need to rehash for you all that whole relationship between Dr. Rowley and Farley Augustine. As we know, Farley's father has declared he doesn't like the PNM at all. He's never voted for the PNM. And his son appears to be adopting, or has adopted, a similar approach. We recall that when Dr. Rowley and the then Minister of Works and Transport, Rohan Sinanan, went to Tobago to conduct a tour of the Studley Park quarry, and they were blocked. When they got to the quarry, they were told that instructions had been received from the higher ups in the THA not to allow them to onto the compound. And this was the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, right? And the Minister of Works and Transport from Trinidad and Tobago were blocked from entering the compound. Let us not forget that. But they roll out the red carpet and the welcome mat for Mrs. Prasad Bisesa when she went there a few days ago. And we recall the recording that emerged just before the general election between Farley and Mrs. Prasad Bisesa. Should I say allegedly? Between Farley and Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, when we were hearing in the discussion about the person who sounded like Mrs. Prasad Bisesa talking about how she would have sent money for the PDP in the last THA election, some $100,000 that was sent up allegedly with Crystalline Moore and the other things that would have been done to support, and how they could work together to be able to ensure that the enemy, that is the PNM, does not succeed in getting a foothold again in Tobago. And Mr. Augustine never denied that the existence of that conversation. In fact, what he said when he was approached by members of the media is that he don't have time for foolishness. He don't have time to respond to foolishness. All right? Then he said that on the platform as well, but never said that it wasn't true. But notwithstanding that fact, you had certain men and women of letters like Hamid Ghani, who the media loves to run to for comment, talking about, well, you can't be sure because we are living in the age of AI, and perhaps those recordings could have been generated by AI. But you have AI experts who came afterwards and said 99% certain that conversation was not AI generated, because when you listen to the voices and certain intonations and stuff that AI cannot yet mimic, it is clear that conversation was not AI generated, and that more than likely 99%, 95 to 99% likely that was an actual recording of a conversation that did in fact take place. And now when we look at the relationship between these two parties, it is clear that was a genuine recording. So I just want to tell the Prime Minister, if you want to say that your visit wasn't politics, but you went and you quoted on more than one occasion the slogan of the TPP in the presence of other political parties, that was a total disrespect to the PNM members in the House and a disrespect to the PDP member in the House. Give the impression that you were not speaking to them and only speaking to the members of the TPP. But you didn't go there to play politics. Oh, of course not. Right. And then you're talking about you're looking at the request to establish a police service in Tobago for the THA to have its own police service that would, I guess, be controlled by the THA. And they don't understand or appreciate what the dangers are in doing something like that. The same request was made of Dr. Rowley too, and he went across there. I just want to show you all how Dr. Rowley would have, unlike what Farley Augustine was willing to do, right? And the many times that Mr. Augustine would have gone on national television and other platforms to ridicule and denigrate the PNM and Dr. Rowley, that Dr. Oli didn't reciprocate. Even when Valley told him to mind his own damn business and all that, you talking to the prime minister of the country and expect the young people to have respect. But you as a leader definitely were not demonstrating that, right? When he talked about that Tobago should have a representative on the National Security Council. Dr. Oli took the National Security Council to Tobago and held a meeting in Tobago, and Mr. Augustine was in fact invited. And he was sitting next to the then Commissioner of Police, Ulla Christopher, the woman who he claimed was wearing Balize bloomers. This is the level of disrespect that the THA Chief Secretary meted out to a number of other senior public officials. Right? He wanted to talk about, a separate police force for Tobago. Dr. Oli met with him and held discussions on that as well. Come on, what is going on with this thing? Yeah, Dr. Oli met with him and was willing to compromise and see what could be done. The airport terminal in Tobago that they did, I recall hearing in the chamber during a contribution made by the Secretary for Tourism, where she made the comment that the government could take the airport terminal and put it between their leg. Yeah, Tashia Boris said that. They could take the airport terminal and put it between their legs. This is the level of disrespect, again, that was meted out to the PNM and Dr. Rowley. But no such is being meted out to Mrs. Prasad Bissessa and so on. Why? Because they need to ensure that they continue to hold on to the THA and hold on to those 2 seats in the hope that they could stymie the PNM from getting back into office in 2030 or whenever the next general election is called. So we continue to monitor that, no surprise there. So the government would have announced this week, Tuesday I think it was, the Trinidad and Tobago Revitalization Blueprint, Trinidad and Tobago Global Hub. That was, up until this morning, that was the talk of the town. Well, this is the front page. This is the back page of today's Express. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the Prime Minister say just a few months ago, as soon as she came into office, that she had given instructions to pause all advertisements in the various media, whether it be the newspaper, television, ads, and so on? All ministries and government departments were to put a freeze on advertising in these print and electronic media, because we're looking at saving money, and a lot of money was being spent on advertising. I don't know by who. Can't be the PNM, because if the PNM was spending a lot of money on advertising, the country would have been aware of all the things that they did over the last 10 years, and you wouldn't have people talking about the PNM do nothing and what they do for the last 10 years, and then when you tell them what was done, the response then is, so how come they didn't talk about that? And how come nobody didn't know about that? But I wonder how much this costs this month, right? I wonder how much this whole page, this whole separate page. I wonder how. And hear how these people deceitful and deceptive, right? So if you went to your grocery, your neighborhood, mini-mart, the gas station, and looking at the newspapers, and you are not one who would normally purchase newspapers, or even if you are one who would normally purchase newspapers, perhaps because the headline jumped out at you, you would have seen this, right? Okay, so you get the impression. And this was cleverly placed to hide this, right? Which is the real headline for today in the Express. The attention-grabbing headline. The headline that would have caused you to say, I feel I'm going to pelt out my $5 today. If it's one Sunday, I'm going to put out my $5. It's today. Even if you normally dismiss the Express. But cleverly, what they did, hide it. All right. So people who were not aware that this story was going to be coming out today about live sport would have bypassed this straight to the benefit of the government. So you have to hand it to them. They're very, very clever. Very clever. Right? So they had their national revitalization, and And I'm going to talk too much on that, right? Because I know the opposition intends to have a press conference on Tuesday morning to speak more in depth on that matter. And so I would leave that to those members of the opposition who will be speaking at that press conference. But I will just touch a little bit on it. And when you look at the grandiose plans that they have, right? For those of us who may not have seen it, right? And this is all of the things that they want to build in the space of 5 to 10 years. Now, if you had listened to the budget debate, you would have heard the Minister of Finance, in reading the budget speech, would have indicated that the intention was, and I held it up for you in this document here, that they intended to build 20,000 houses in 2 years, right? And when the question was posed during the Standing Finance Committee stage of the debate to David Lee, he said, well, in this fiscal, they intend to build, I think, 612 houses in this 12-month period, which means if you're planning to build an average of 612, or even if you take it up to 800 houses per fiscal, in 5 years, you're looking at about 4,000 houses, not 20,000 houses in 2 years. This is a significant departure from what we were told during the election campaign by Julian John, that they'd be building 500 houses a week. 500 a week, but then that changed to 612 in 1 year. But they plan to build all of these things. All of these things, right? They're going to build. And so the ongoing conversation now is, well, whose it was and who plan it was and whether it was PNM plan or Vision 2020 or if it's the UNC. And I'm not going to get into that conversation, really, because to me it's, talking about development for the country. And the UNC supporters, as is the norm, when you read the comments, well, yes, finally, visionary leadership. This is what we needed all the time. Finally, a prime minister who's interested in developing the country and is going to take the country forward. And that is why she's the mother of the nation and she's our mother and our queen and our goddess. All your own, not mine. Right? Not mine at all. And so they're all fascinated by all of these things. You all remember between 2010 to 2015 when we were promised they were going to build a tunnel from, I think, Tunapuna to Maracas? What happened to that? Remember, they were supposed to build a causeway costing $10 billion from Chaguaramas to the waterfront, where they said that, to get to Chaguaramas is one way in, one way out, and you need to fix that. We need a second thoroughfare, so we will build a causeway from the waterfront to Chaguaramas. What happened to that? Between 2010 to 2015, what happened? We saw the Western Peninsula, acres and acres of land was given out to the private sector. Dare I say the so-called 1%. At peppercorn rates, you all have heard me speak on many occasions about the 4 acres of land that was farmland or agricultural land that was bulldozed, and the crops of the farmers was heaped up in a corner for them to come and dig it out. And these 4 acres of land was supposed to have been given to a certain individual to build a car park for his water park. And the plan was, based on what was reported, subsequent to their demitting office, was based on what the CDA would have reported. The arrangement was that this individual would pay $1 a year for this 4 acres of land. He would build a car park that could hold 1,000 cars and then lease the car park to the CDA, which is the Chaguaramas Development Authority, for $900,000 a month. So over 30 years, he would have paid $30 to the state for this 4 acres of land, but he would have received over $10 million a year. For 30 years, over $300 million would have been received. And out of that, only $30 would have been paid to the state for that parcel of land. We saw where land would have been given to an individual who established a petting zoo which has long closed. We saw that the Chaguaramas Convention Center had been leased out, or was for some 30 million or something like that, right? And then, again, to the very same 1% who for the last 10 years, we have heard, were nothing more than a bunch of greedy eater food PNM financiers who you need to stay far from. In fact, the Prime Minister just a couple of months ago issued a warning to her ministers. So she understands that some of her ministers have been cavorting and meeting with these people in the Hyatt, and you need to stay away, and she wants to let them know that she's aware and stop it, because she will bust your head and she will fire you. These same corrupt eater food PNM financiers you all are now meeting with and having dinner and lunch with and drinks with. Stop it. But Thursday, all of them, the same greedy eater food PNM finance, 1% financiers, or as Basio Pandey called them, the parasitic oligarchy, were invited en masse to come to the diplomatic center so that the Prime Minister could show you all this grandiose plan that they have, and she could invite you all to bring your money and come, because we want to enter into public-private partnership with you to be able to make this dream a reality. And many people looked at it and described it as pie in the sky, given the UNC's track record and, by extension, the national track record when it comes to development. And when we look at some of these things, some of these plans that they have, some of these buildings that they want to put up, things that you would normally see in places like Dubai and that side of the world, right? These things are alien or foreign to this side of the world. And there's a reason why. Because people who are accustomed to these types of things, when they come to the Caribbean, they're not coming to the Caribbean to look for that, right? What is the unique product that the Caribbean has that these other countries don't have, which attracts people to come to the Caribbean? So they don't come to the Caribbean to see tall buildings. They don't come to the Caribbean to see all of these fanciful types of architecture. That is not what they come for. They come for the sun, they come for the sea, the sand, they come for that rustic look, that, you know, that whole Caribbean vibe that is non-existent in the majority of the world, except for those other countries that may have similar Caribbean features or climate, right? But the UNC seems to want to turn Trinidad and Tobago into Dubai. Their supporters always talking about that. We should have been like Dubai. Trinidad had 2 oil boom under the PNM. And when they look at Qatar and they look at Dubai and how much thing and Lord, why we could be so, we should have been looking like that. And I keep telling them we could never have looked like that. 2 main reasons. One, we never had the amount of oil production that Dubai had and Qatar had. So yes, you could talk about oil boom, but if you compare Trinidad's oil boom to what was normal production, not even an oil boom in Dubai, one oil boom in Qatar or Saudi Arabia, right? Nothing close. What we consider to be an oil boom, or what the UNC supporters consider to be oil boom in Trinidad, is equivalent to normal operations of the energy sector in these countries, or even less. Because like in Guyana right now, where they're producing some 650 to 700,000 barrels of oil per day. In our heyday, when we were going through this so-called oil boom, how much were we producing? 200 and something thousand barrels a day. At best, maybe 300,000 with a push. Over a sustained period of time, as compared to Dubai, when they would have gotten into oil production and producing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of 2 and 3 and 4 times what we were producing. If you sell more, you make more money. And when we were going through our so-called oil boom, what was the price of oil as compared to when Dubai came on the scene? What was the price of oil then? So they always had more money than we did. So they could have afforded to pay for these things, to fund these things. If our government was fortunate, or if our country was fortunate to have the type of oil production at any point in time in our energy history, even close to what Guyana has now, 600,000-700,000 barrels of oil per day, of course, our financial circumstance would have been much better, and there would have been a lot more money for the government to use to develop the country. But people keep complaining about PNM thing and all that money and $600 billion in the last 10 years, and where all that money went. When 85 to 90% of the budget, annual budget, goes to paying wages, salaries, transfers, and subsidies, there isn't much money left over for infrastructural development and for capital expenditure. Because everybody wants a government work. Everybody wants a handout. And whether it is that handout comes in the form of you want to pay less money for gas when you go to the gas station, and you want a subsidized rate when you go on the ferry to Tobago, and you want a subsidized rate when it is that you jump on the plane to go to Tobago, and you want subsidized rates for water, subsidized rates for electricity, and every service that the government provides. We want free healthcare, we want free education from nursery to tertiary, everything the government must pay for. Everything. We want to pay $400 and something a year in health surcharge and expect to get the best healthcare available in the whole world. And then we compare Trinidad and Tobago's healthcare sector with that of the United States, not taking into consideration the fact that if you want the best, the reason why you can get better, I wouldn't say the best, because people who are not accustomed traveling, right, would not know. And so all they see is what they see a little bit on the internet and they see on television and figure, oh, when you see, look at all of these television programs and you see how they do it when somebody gets sick and all this other equipment, and we don't have that here. Because you have to pay your money over there. Don't forget, you have to purchase health insurance, either that or make sure your bank account fat. Otherwise, you're in problems. You go to the hospital for one issue and you come out with another, because while you're lying on in the hospital bed, you're worried. You're getting gray because you're studying, oh God, this bill, every day that passes, the bill going up. And what is the bill going to be? And if you don't have health insurance, and even if you do have health insurance, you're concerned about the copay because the insurance not paying 100%. And when you look at, as the bill continues to go up, your portion of that bill continues to go up and you're stressed out. Just the other day, I had a good friend of mine who was in the US, and she fell ill while she was there, went to visit her son and fell ill. And I think she was in the hospital for a week and she was concerned. And she kept reaching out to me because she has health insurance in Trinidad and she wanted to make sure that it covered the bill. So she wanted to find, well, hey, what you have to do and so on. But you have to pay for it over there. You bounce it when you call an ambulance. Every time you call the ambulance and it's dispatched, the bill start to run. It's not free. Like here, you could call the ambulance, come and pick you up, they take you to the hospital, and while you're in the back of the ambulance, you're getting attended to and it costs you nothing. You go in the hospital, you stay there for 2 weeks to a month, you're getting education, you're getting your medication and 3 square meals for the day. Even if your family bring in food and stuff for you, they're still providing you with meals. And then when you recover sufficient to be discharged, they give you a prescription and tell you go down to the dispensary. So you're getting the medication free too, and then you go back home and you're happy, and it costs you nothing. But it costs the state. And you will say, well, it costs me because I'm a taxpayer. Some of you, all the only taxes you're paying is VAT. And the VAT you're paying is next to nothing. But you want the best healthcare, and if the government of Trinidad and Tobago to come and say, well, we're changing things up now and you have to get a health insurance, like existed in the United States where they had something called the healthcare mandate. I don't know if they still have it, but under that mandate, you were obligated to purchase health insurance. And if it is that you did not, they would charge you a fee based on your household income. So you had to pay a penalty for not having health insurance because the government does not want to have to pick up that cost. But you feel we can do that here? No, you cannot. We take it for granted to have a little pothole on the highway. You're cussing, hey, the government, and look at the state of the road, mashing up your car. But in the United States, not just in the US, in Guyana, in Jamaica, they have toll roads. So you have to pay. You want to drive on the best roads? Well, you will pay for it. And again, for those of us who travel often and who would rent cars or who have family members over there and have access to a vehicle, would know that every time you pass through the toll gate, there's a cost. You get this flashing light and it flashes, it takes a picture, whatever, scan your license plate. And if it is you rented a car and then you come back home 2-3 weeks later and then you check your email and you see you get a bill from the car rental company for the toll. I would know every time I travel, and when I rent the car and I come back and 2-3 weeks later and I get the email from Hertz sending me my toll bill for driving on their roads. You have to pay for that. You think the government can introduce that here? You're mad? Oh, they're wicked and they're evil and they only want to oppress the people. But the same people who complaining here will happily go to the United States of America and pay their toll money easy. No complaints. They accept it. In fact, they're budgeting for that as part of their expenses. So they're expecting it to come. But here, we can't do that. But they will go to Jamaica and use the highway over there and they will pay the toll and hush them out. Guyana. I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if other countries introduce it too. Even in places like St. Lucia, Dominica, certain things you go to the hospital for, you have to pay. I was surprised to learn that when my friend from St. Lucia was telling me, we were talking about how things operate in our country, and I asked her if healthcare was free in their country, and she said, well, it had to pay. When you get to the hospital, you have to pay an admission fee, and then after you're treated, then they will decide the other things that you have to pay for. We don't have that here. So when they love to talk about oil boom under the PNM and how we should have been this and that, no, education is free. will say it is not free. But in the US, you have to take student loans. Some people go through 20, 30 years after they finish studying and still have student loans that they're paying for. You all don't have that issue here because you have GATE, which many people abuse. And then again, coming to the issue of this whole development thing. And the conversation now is what the PNM do. And the PNM waste, they was in power for the longest and they waste the money and what you have to show for it. The majority of the state-owned infrastructure in this country was developed by the People's National Movement. And I wonder if these, I keep saying, supporters of the UNC live in a totally different reality from everybody else. Right? The PNM do nothing. And they waste the money. They were there for 60-something, 40-something, 50-something years out of how much years of independence, and they ain't do nothing. But the school that you went to was built by the PNM. The education, the free education that you got was paid for with the same dollars that the PNM managed. I saw Paulo Kernahan put up a post yesterday and again maligning the PNM, talking about the same revitalization program of the government and want to do a comparative analysis and giving UNC credit for the Grand Bazaar interchange. I had to ask him, I said, you mad? Are you saying that the UNC built the Grand Bazaar interchange? Just like they wanted to take credit for the Grandy Hospital, the Arima Hospital, the Point Fortin Hospital, which they did not build. They just turned sod and the PNM built, but they want to take credit for that. The PNM started the Grand Bazaar interchange. And when government changed hands in 2010, they finished it. It was already probably about 50 to 60% complete. They met up the project in train when they came into office. Everything was already in place, so it was just for it to continue, and they got the pleasure of cutting the ribbon for a PNM project. And just down the road, the same Arangwes interchange as well, that was started under the PNM, and they came in 2010, met it ongoing, and it was just a matter of allowing the project to complete. Same way they came in and they met a number of schools under construction that was started under the Manning administration, ECCE centers that was started under the Manning administration. But because the election was called early, the PNM lost office, they came in, met all of these infrastructure projects ongoing, and it was completed under them, and they decided to take credit for it. And when it was pointed out to them, the hypocrisy in the House by Anthony Garcia, when he read out the whole long list, they were claiming they built 106 schools. And when Anthony Garcia was finished, that 106 was whittled down to probably about 52. And there was no response from the other side. None. Nobody got up after to challenge what was said because Garcia walked with his receipts, his documentation from the ministry's office to read out, and they couldn't deny it. But yet still the supporters continue to make that claim. So somebody like Paulo Kernahan, who's supposed to be researched, I was surprised to see him posting such utter rubbish. And the only PNM do nothing. And the only thing the PNM did that made sense and they could endorse was CDAP. Mr. Pandey started dollar for dollar, tertiary education. Come with your dollar and the government will match it. You want to get a degree? You come with your dollar, and for every dollar you come with, the government will match it. But if you have no dollars, you have no money, then this is not for you. Wheel and come again. Go and find your dollars and come back. When the PNM came into office, Mr. Manning said, listen, too many people are excluded. And the patrimony of the country belongs to everybody. So you know what? Open the gate wide. Whether you have a dollar, you don't have a dollar, come. We paying for everybody using the monies that belong to you, the citizens. And how many hundreds of thousands of citizens in this country were able to benefit from tertiary education because of the PNM deciding to amend and to improve what the UNC did. So while their program, their dollar for dollar, excluded a lot of people, Mr. Manning came and opened the gate. The PNM created gate and said, everybody come. And we're not only giving you paying for your tertiary expenses because we understand there are other expenses and it makes no sense with paying for tuition, but you can't afford to buy the books and the other things that you need. So we'll create something called the HELP loan, the Higher Education Loan Program, where the government is going to provide the funding, right? And you go to whichever commercial bank and you take the loan, and that loan is to help you to purchase your books. You need to get a laptop and other supplies that you need to be able to study and get your degree. The PNM created that. But no credit for those things. No credit for those things. The same CDAP that the PNM would have created makes mention, okay, that was a good thing. But today they want to malign it. Oh, the drugs that the PNM had, I think it wasn't good enough, and Kamala come and she fixed it and she changed it around, and now we're getting better drugs and all of that. Again, the availability of money. What did they build between 2010 to 2015? The majority of things that they built was paid for with borrowed money from the Chinese. The Aquatic Center, they take loan for that. The Couva Children's Hospital, they take loan for that. The National Cycling Center, the Velodrome in Couva, they take loan for that. The Racket Center in Takariwa, they took loan for that too. So now they have, I don't know where this big grandiose plan came from. Who came up with that? Because there was never any mention of this, to the best of my recollection, in the UNC's manifesto, the manifesto. No talk of this ever came up during the election campaign. In fact, over the course of the last 10 years, I don't recall ever hearing Mrs. Prasad Biswas or anybody from the UNC talk about this. So this is something that would have been developed over the course of the last 6 months. So somebody come and sell them a dream. They say, yeah, that's looking good, boy. How much for that? Well, I would love to know how much they paid for that slideshow that they had, right? Whose idea was that? They're so lazy. They bought this thing wholesale. They didn't even say, well, okay, let us get the script, right? And we will have somebody read it, put in a local voice or add a little local flair. They come and they give you they change nothing. So even the AI generated British accent of the person narrating for the video, even that and all, they couldn't even be creative enough to say, well, all right, let me at least give the impression that this is something that we were part of and that we were working on now. Yeah, so get the script, let them take out that part, and let's just get somebody a voice that people know to narrate it, and then we will just put it in the video and add a little local flair. Couldn't even do that. But they come and have this grand exposition, right? And all of these businessmen and bankers and who got this invite, and they came and they sat down there and they looked at it with mouths agape. You couldn't tell if they were impressed or if they were mesmerized or if they were dumbfounded. But a few of them decided to talk after. Oh, this is so visionary, and yes, this is great. One such person, TNT must dream big, the head of the Ansamaccal Corporation, right? TNT must dream big. What he says here, business leaders on board with government's revitalization plan. Business leaders on board, right? And so everybody talking about the PNM thing and Vision 2020 and Vision 2030 and Rowley didn't do nothing for the last 10 years with respect to the development of the country. Wasn't the PNM in the process of building the construction on the development of the San Fernando waterfront project, which the UNC dismissed as a vanity project, which Mrs. Prasad Biswas indicated that should the UNC win, they would put a stop to it? You all remember that? That is their favorite term, vanity project. The Port of Spain waterfront, that all of them happy to have their offices. We saw the video with Alexander in his brand new office that he's so happy to be in, to move out of Temple Court on Abercrombie Street and to be in the high rise where he could rock back in his nice big leather chair and look out the window and watch the ferry come in or the cruise ship when it come in and just take in the sunset. Yeah, from high up. It's a good thing Mr. Manning built that. But when it was under construction, you recall what the position of the then, well, she wasn't opposition leader then, but opposition member of parliament, Kamala Prasad Biswas, so what was her position? That the Manning is obsessed with tall buildings. He wants to change the skyline of Port of Spain. Vanity projects. That money could be better spent on healthcare and education and paving roads and building schools instead of what Manning wants to spend that money on. He obsessed with tall buildings. That was her position. He is overheating the economy and crowding out the private sector. Because if you want to build a house, you can't get a mason, you can't get a carpenter, you can't get laborers, you can't get red sand, gravel, or cement. You can't get blocks because the government buy up everything with all these things that they're building. And so you just can't. I don't know if at the time remember she said she built the Pink Palace, chirrup. So she and Greg use, every time they get a piece of money, they buy some material and put it down, and they do a little thing and they do a little thing. That's how they were operating for years. And she came to the parliament with the old dog-ears notebook to write on all the time they buy and what they bought and all of these different things. And then all of a sudden, as she became prime minister in 2010, the house finished, but not only finished, it grew. They had interested heliport and all kind of helipad and all kind of thing. Don't forget that. But it was a vanity project. So imagine my surprise when I looked at this video, and at 7 minutes and 58 seconds, in looking at the video, I saw a train, a light rail pulling into the station. And at that point in the video, they're talking about the transportation hub, where you're transporting from. Let me see if I get it here. I don't want to misquote. Give me 1 second. Let me pull it up. Let's know. Where is it? Right. So let me get it here.
Welcome to Trinidad and Tobago, our vibrant twin island nation, now emerging as a global logistical hub, Tobago's gateway to the world. A new gateway for efficient, comfortable, and accessible transport. Connecting communities and harmonizing land, sea, and rail for fluid movement. Swift.
Harmonizing land, sea, and rail for fluid movement. Transportation hub. As rail I hear it, I say nah. Let me listen to that a second time. Let me listen to it a third time. Let me listen to it a fourth time. And then I had to send it to a friend and say, listen to this and tell me if I heard rail. And if I just saw a train pulling into the station there. Because I'm confused. Can't be that this is something that the UNC is now telling us they want to do. But when the last Manning administration proposed the rapid rail, I recall the very same UNC, led by Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, called that a vanity project, a waste of money. We don't need a train system in Trinidad and Tobago. What we need to do is to fix the current transportation system, fix PTSC, buy more buses. We need to build more roads and widen the existing highways and so on to reduce the traffic so that the bus service could work well and the maxi taxi service could work well and people could use the public transport system as is. And we don't need to spend all of that money on any train. We don't need it. But they provided you with a video. Why is this thing freezing? Yeah. Provided you with a video that includes a train. So we could only assume, right, that that's part of the plan. Transportation aspect of the revitalization program for Trinidad and Tobago. And all of these waterfront residences that they want to build all over the place. And Julian John saying, well, people don't live in Port of Spain anymore. And we need to bring back people to live in Port of Spain, and particularly the young professionals. So we need to have housing accommodation for them. So where PowerGen was, the intention is to put up high-rise buildings there. And then down on Invaders Bay, behind Movie Town there, where Mr. Derek Chin wants to put up something called Streets of the World. We're going to put high-rise buildings there too, residences, right? Waterfront. For who to buy? How are you paying for that? These waterfront residences aren't cheap. And then they want to go down on the foreshore and put up some more down on that side too. For who? Who's going to buy that? We have Victoria Keys, which the Manning administration originally intended to construct as low-income housing for under the HDC for average citizens to purchase. The UNC People's Partnership came in 2010, and what did they do? They decided those housing units were too good for the persons who would normally qualify for HDC housing. So they took that out of the HDC housing stock. Well, they didn't take it out. What they did was to increase the qualifying household income for an HDC unit from $25,000 to $45,000. And in doing so, persons who would not normally have qualified for an HDC house because of the size of their income could now qualify. So if your household income, if you have 3-4 people living in the household, and the combined income is $25,000 or less, you could qualify for an HDC house. Anything above $25,000, they tell you, well, no, you need to go to the bank and you need to get a mortgage in the bank to purchase private sector housing, because HDC housing is not for you. Your salary allows you to be able to afford to get a mortgage for private sector housing, the more expensive band. But they inside increase it to 45,000. So the lawyers and the doctors and the engineers who support the UNC, they could now qualify for HTC homes and compete. And you increase the pool of people who were all now competing for this limited HTC housing stock. And obviously, the people who could afford more and whose pockets are deeper, they would probably get the opportunities. So you took Victoria Keys, which was intended for the low-income man, so that he too could get a sea view. He could step out on his balcony and look at the ocean and see the sunset and see the water taxi and the ferry coming in and see the cruise ship leaving. He could enjoy that too. So now that's too good for them. So what you did, you converted 3-bedroom apartments into 2-bedroom apartments. You put in swimming pool and gym and clubhouse and concierge service and all of these different things. And those units, of course, would have been for certain people of a certain ilk. So all those hundreds of units that should have been part of the housing stock, for people who sitting down and complaining, they're waiting 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30 years to get called, all those units, unfortunately, became unavailable for them under Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar in her first dispensation as Prime Minister. Put in penthouse and all kind of thing costing millions of dollars. And when the PNM came in, of course, because of the amount of money that was spent for that, developed by the UNC, the People's Partnership, to convert it into what they converted it for their friends, family, and financiers whose pockets were deep, the government said, well, look, we can't, based on the amount of money that was spent on this and all of these amenities and so on, and I was put in, it makes logical sense. We're going to have to put this on the open market, all right, and make it available to the young professionals or even those who have money. Because I think an apartment in Victoria Keys, a 1-bedroom starts at, I think, $1.4 million. And then a 2-bedroom is about 1.8 or something, and it goes up depending on, but all of the facilities there. So you drive in, you have your key card to swipe, and you go inside, and then you have your private parking spot and all of these covered parking, all these things that the UNC put in there, right, for certain people. But when Mr. Manning was constructing it as vanity projects and you're overheating the economy, and we don't need that. And as soon as they come into office and they saw the opportunity, and they decide, we're going to fix that up for certain people to get, and you excluded the same poor people whose backs you ride to get into office. They give you your vote, and then that's what you came and you did to them. We're talking about the housing stock. The same waterfront project that was articulated in their budget under Pandey, I think in the second to last or the last budget of then Minister of Finance, Gerald Yetming. Just there, go and see it. You can pull it up on Hansard. Same waterfront project was articulated as Skip saying. The only difference is that they had planned, instead of the Hyatt, to have the Marriott. Great project. Yes, visionary. You lost the election, the PNM came in, and Mr. Manning decided to build it. And all of a sudden, it went from visionary to vanity. From visionary project to vanity project. And you had problems with it. The Rapid Rail was no good, but today it's visionary. And again, business leaders are on board. TNT must dream big. When the PNM spoke about it, that wasn't dreaming big. No, that was pie in the sky. We're not interested. And I will never forget, when I saw this again, it just reinforced. When Dr. Rowley spoke about the Sandals project, and the construction of the marina, the $8 billion project that the PNM under Dr. Keith Rowley had planned for Tobago, which included the Sandals Resort, the Beaches Resort, which was supposed to be the largest Sandals and Beaches Resort in the entire Caribbean, was supposed to be housed in Tobago. The construction of the marina, among other things, that $8 billion project. And Dr. Rowley would have indicated at that post-cabinet press briefing, when the media posed the question to him about how this was going to be funded. And he said the government sent out individual letters of invitation to several private sector companies, inviting them to come on board and partner with the government in this public-private partnership to fund this endeavor. The first company he mentioned was Ansa McCall. And he said Ansa McCall declined to be a part of the initiative. Declined. And then he went on to mention Republic Bank, NIB, Massey Group, Guardian Holdings had all indicated their willingness an interest in participating, and he said there were a few other companies whose names skipped him at the moment, but that he could have provided the list to the members of the media. Public-private partnership. And Samakal declined. They were not interested in being part of that development under the PNM. But today, TNT must dream big. Business leaders are on board. On board. So the government don't have the money for this. They need the private sector to be a part of it. And when the PNM invited the private sector, one of the largest private sector entities said, we're not interested. Right? We're not interested. But they're interested now. In fact, on Thursday, the same gentleman right here, right, and his son were among those who were invited. And there is, of course, the viral picture going out now with him, with the both of them and Mrs. Prasad Bisesa having an animated conversation. And both men are well decked off in their bright yellow ties, as if to send a subliminal message to Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, because I'm sure they have lots of ties of varied colors, varied designs. But on that particular day, both of them decided to wear their bright yellow ties. Coincidence. We just felt like wearing yellow today. We don't live in the same house, but we were just of like minds. We just woke up and these ties just jumped out at us and say, wear us today. I decided to put it on. And if you looked at during the news and a scan of the room, you would see a lot more persons like these gentlemen who were there. The greedy, eater food, 1% PNM financiers that we heard about for the last 10 years. The wicked, evil, greedy 1%ers who raped the treasury through rentals, all the buildings that they were rented. The dossier that Mrs. Prasad Bisesa has with all of these buildings that are owned by the 1%, and I will tell you all about it on another night, never came back. The same people that she doesn't want her ministers meeting with and drinking with and cavorting with, otherwise she'll bust their head and fire them. All of them were invited to this event on Tuesday for the grand unveiling of this great revitalization plan. Interestingly, you mentioned the name of it is the Trinidad and Tobago Revitalization Blueprint. And I watched the video in its entirety, and not one word was mentioned about Tobago. Nothing was mentioned about Tobago. Why is that? Is it that development in Tobago is to be left to the THA? Central government has no intention of doing anything in Tobago, developing anything in Tobago, when Tobago is supposed to be the crown jewel for tourism. Unlike the last PNM administration, which wanted to invest at least $8 billion in Tobago, right? Which, as I said, included the marina, the airport terminal, the Sandals Resort, the Beaches Resort, which would have belonged to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and would have been run and managed under the Sandals brand to encourage. Sandals would have spent their money to bring airlift, as they do in the other countries where they exist, where they go out and they negotiate with all of the various airlines to bring people to these countries. That's what they do. So when you look on cable, when you're watching TV and you see the Sandals ad comes up, Sandals paying for that, advertising these countries. We would have paid, and again, public-private partnership. So when you look at the list of companies that expressed interest in investing in that, not Ansamakal, the other companies, it is quite possible that the contribution that they would have made would have been such that the government may not have had to put in a single dime, not a penny into that. But they sell it. Oh, they went and take a loan just the other day, and Robert's talking that rubbish. When it was announced that the Sandals is building the next resort that was supposed to be housed in Tobago, that they're building it in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The first one that Tobago was supposed to get is completed in St. Vincent, and now the second one, the Beaches Resort, is now also being constructed in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And months later, we have no idea what is happening if Sandals is giving any consideration to revisiting the idea of establishing or building something in Tobago. We don't want no resort, no Sandals resort on no man's land. We ain't want that, no man's land, this and that. But they want to build a boutique resort hotel on Carrera Island, which now houses a prison. This is the second time. In their first incarnation, they come and they talk about Carrera prison. They wanted to shut down the Carrera prison. and they were going to expand Golden Grove and bring all the prisoners from Carrera and all the prisoners from the maximum security prison on the Royal Jail on Frederick Street. They were going to bring all of these prisoners and put them in this facility in Golden Grove. And that is why they spent all of this money, so they say, to build this fence, this $1 million fence, multi-million dollar, $88 million fence outside the prison. For those of us who live in the East, or those of you who frequent the East, the people from down south might not be too aware of it. That when you drive up there, it runs from the highway all the way up to the prison. Long drive. And all you're seeing from the entirety, from one end to the next, is bush. $88 million of taxpayers' money spent, and the only thing it got in is bush. And I keep saying, they should lease that out to Trevor Sayers. He can make our money and pay them something. When you get to the top of it, there is no nexus between the fence and the prison, because there is a big car park between the fence and the prison. What is the purpose of that? You don't know. But they build that. Contractor get money, who eat our food, and in fact, the prison officers refer to it as the eat our food fence. Nothing guards nothing. It serves no useful purpose. But the contractor eat a piece of money, and whoever else get a cutback from it. And as my partner Dean Francois always says, when you're in government, if you want to thief, build. And the UNC has mastered that. We saw the Beetham wastewater treatment plant, which they indicated that they're going to, they intend to restart. We saw the purchase and what is now the Eastern Correctional Rehabilitation Center, the massive warehouse, the old warehouse that they purchased to turn into a prison to hold detainees in the 2011 state of emergency that cost over $300 million. Remember Eden Gardens that they spent $175 million for, that was valued by Lyndon Scott, private valuator Lyndon Scott, for $52 million. And I've played that video for you all, that recording on numerous occasions, the interview that was done with Afra Raymond and Rennie B, where Afra Raymond would have outlined how that was a big fraud. And people were supposed to make jail for that, because the state need not have even paid for that land, because it was Caroni land. But they paid all this set of money for it. This company that purchased this land just a few months before paid $5 million for the land, parceled it out, and then sold it back to the government for $175 million. Wanted $200 million for it, right? And they negotiated it down to $175 million. Now, the same company was advertising lots on this development on the Facebook pages or the websites of two real estate companies for $400,000 a lot. But the government of Trinidad and Tobago, led by Kamla Persad Bissessa, between 2010 to 2015, according to Afra Raymond, paid $664,000 a lot when it was being advertised on the websites of two real estate companies for $400,000 a lot. Who eat our food? So they have a track record when it comes to building. And so the same 1%, 2% that they were cussing for the last 10 years, you invite all of them to come now and to be a part of this. Come on board. We will give you land at peppercorn rates again. You just bring your money and come. And we're going to build it. All right? So when I listen to the supporters knocking the PNM why they didn't do it for the last 10 years, with what money? With what money? The government invited the very same private sector to come on board. And this guy here, his company said they were not interested. All right? And all these set of grandiose things that they want to build, the 600,000 square feet of office space to house Premier Financial District, surrounded by 300,000 square feet of high-end retail space. For who? To be taken up by whom? When we have a whole Tri-City Mall that looking like a ghost town, full of empty retail space. So who exactly is going to utilize this 300,000 square feet of high-end retail space? We have Long Circular Mall. Same thing. Go up on a couple of the floors and a set of empty spaces. Belong vacated. You can't get those filled, but you want to build 300,000 square feet of high-end retail space. For who? If it's a high-end retail space, you know what that means, right? It's going to be occupied by high-end businesses. Who's spending the money there? You just fired over 50,000 of the nation's poorest. So the closest they will come to this is maybe some of them, if they have experience, or if they're able-bodied enough to do construction, that's as close as they will get to it. Right? And they'll probably walk through when it's open, but just a window shop, because they can't afford to shop in high-end retail spaces. So who is that really for? So are we about building pink elephants? I'm just asking the question. Now, I made the reference before of Victoria Keys, which has a number of empty apartments that are available for sale and have been available for sale for the last 10 years. No takers. You have Federation Park Villas, again, owned by the state, starting at about $3 million for one. And my understanding is several of them are still empty, available for sale. Nobody buying it. So when you build all of these waterfront residences, who buying it? You have a number of private sector real estate developments. Champs-Élysées, starting at $5.5–6 million, and they have available. Villas of Highland Park, starting at about $5.5–6.5 million, and they have available. So if nobody buying these, why are you building all of these waterfront residences for who to buy? Is it that you plan to invite foreigners to come and purchase it? I just asking. So it's not really for locals. But what else do you have to attract the foreigners? Because when they come here, they can't get US dollars. They come in to set up business and they can't repatriate their money because you can't get US dollars. So we bring in the US dollars to Trinidad, but we can't get it out when the business is established. All of these conference centers. Yeah, we need a couple, maybe one, good one, because we don't have that many conferences here for the size of facility that you want to build. But okay, build it. Build it. But you want to build multiple. Right now, Hyatt, a lot of the money that Hyatt makes comes from conferences, right? Whether it be locals or international entities that decide to come to Trinidad to host their conferences here. So when you build these conference centers, what do you think is going to happen to Hyatt? They are going to see a significant decline in revenues. Because again, a lot of their money comes from the hosting of conferences outside of the room stock. Companies that have award ceremonies and all of these different things. But you want to now come and build all of these hotels, which would not be state-owned. So you will provide land and the private sector will come and we will build. In Tobago, for the longest while, the same 1%er who owns the Bricks Hotel, for which, when it was previously called the Carlton Savannah, for which First Citizens Bank advanced some $500 million in loans to a particular consortium of businessmen. And that the man who was at the helm of the bank at that time, when they gave these loans to this consortium of businessmen without any collateral. And so when the hotel failed and they abandoned it and they walked away from it, it cost them nothing. And the hotel went into receivership, and of course the bank took it back and ended up selling it for less than what was owing on the loan. But the very same man who owns that hotel today, for the longest while, has been trying to get to build a hotel, a Marriott hotel in Tobago. Is it at Rocky Point, I think is the name of it? And the THA has been pushing back on that. And we understand this, well, 1% thing now. And they come up with all kind of excuses. Ancestral bones were found on the site. The light from the hotel will affect the turtles that nesting. All of that. They have every excuse under the sun why this hotel shouldn't be built in Tobago, which they desperately need for tourism because they have no all-inclusive, save and except for, I think, maybe Cocoa Reef. But Cocoa Reef doesn't have conference facilities that are required. Why aren't you building a conference facility in Tobago to take advantage of, again, conference tourism? Nothing for Tobago mentioned here. I just make an offer to Tobagonians who listening. It's called the Trinidad and Tobago Revitalization Blueprint. I nothing for in here. No mention of you all. Right? But businesses closing down in Trinidad and Tobago. But this is business leaders on board. This is visionary. PNM never had anything of that like, of that ilk. No vision for Trinidad and Tobago. Yes. But something that did not exist 6 months ago All of a sudden, in 6 months, we were able to develop this. Somebody just, this is not something that was on the drawing board for years that we thought about, and we did the feasibility studies and the cost benefit analysis. No, they just came up out of the blue. Never heard about this before in the last 6 months. So you were able to develop that in 6 months. Somebody who's very good at AI came and did. Wow, that is. A premier 400-acre port in the region facilitating 4 million TEUs per annum. Dry docking facilities with the capacity to accommodate 4 300-meter post-Panamax vessels. 6 mathematically designed ballrooms for the San Fernando Convention Center. What else they have here? Invaders Bay Foreshore Residences, 300 premium waterfront apartments. The rejuvenated waterfront living. 1,800 plus residential units along the waterfront, San Fernando. The same waterfront residences that Prasad Bisesa say she canceling. The PNM was in the process of building the reclamation of the land and so on. So they feel a lie. I'm going to look at the time. Might have to continue this with a part 2. Let me get it here. Where is it? Yes, so. I do like to. This article dated, let me get it here. The 8th of April 2025. Kamla, UNC will terminate $300 million waterfront housing contracts. A UNC government would find a way to terminate the $300 million in housing contracts recently announced for the San Fernando waterfront project. A UNC government will also find the money to pay public servants' salary increases and their back pay. Never fear, we will find it. Speaking at the party's general election meeting in Barataria, Prasad Bisesa said, I can see it, I can taste it, I can feel it. The UNC will win on April 28. Prasad Bisesa slammed local government minister Faris Al-Rawi's recent announcement about the beginning of construction of high-rise apartment buildings for $300 million as part of the ongoing San Fernando waterfront redevelopment project. In the middle of an election campaign, on the eve of an election, $300 million in contracts to build houses on the San Fernando waterfront. Who are those houses for? Who can afford that land? That land should be for the people of TNT for industrial, manufacturing, and other kinds of development. But they want to give $300 million in contracts. Well, when we get in there, we will find a way to terminate those contracts. This is an election time. Don't be handing out the people's money. See that here? 1,800 waterfront residences along the waterfront. San Fernando. Right? Who is that for? Who can afford that? Who can afford that land? Well, apparently in the last 6 months, she discovered who could afford it and who could afford the land. So it wasn't good before the general election. Right? You tell people that vote for us because I waste some money, 200 million, the PNM want to waste. After the election, this is good. When the PNM announced it, waste some money. UNC announced it, oh, it's visionary. Oh yes, that is the type of leadership that we need. Government with foresight. PNM had none of that. Central Government Campus Plaza, 100-acre decentralization solution. So we're going to create a government campus plaza in Chaguanas. So we're moving ministries out of Port of Spain. We're going to put them in Chaguanas. So for those of us who are familiar with Chaguanas and the kind of traffic that you have in Chaguanas, which is one of the reasons I hate to go in Chaguanas. I have an office in Chaguanas, but if I go there once a month, I go plenty because of that Chaguanas traffic. Just to go, you see that roundabout by Price Plaza there. When you come off the highway, if you want to go back across on the side by Medford, that is just a headache. For years, San Fernando, Chaguanas can't seem, the leadership of Chaguanas can't seem to find a way to treat with that traffic. But we're going to build a 100-acre government campus plaza in Chaguanas to move government offices out of Port of Spain. Health City, 400 car parking spaces, 300 short stay units to provide more comfort and support to families as they visit their loved ones at the hospital. Let me read that again. 400 car parking spaces and 300 short stay units to provide more comfort and support to families as they visit their loved ones at the hospital. This is the same UNC that had a problem with the car park that the last administration built for the San Fernando General Hospital. The The same UNC that condemned and maligned that project. And who would they build upon? But now they're telling you they're going to build 400 car parking spaces for the same hospital. We're going again. Waterfront Hotel, 250 waterfront hotel. Well, I guess it's rooms with 50 marina berths, 15,000 square feet restaurant, spa, and rooftop garden. Well, you just increase the price of alcohol. Restaurants balling, they cry, and people coming on. They ain't buying no alcohol, or people ain't coming out. Because they rather take that money and they could buy the alcohol and go home and cook. But you want to build a hotel, 1,500 square feet restaurant, spa, and rooftop garden. Last train to San Fernando, a functional solar-powered tram, allowing visitors to move up and down the entire waterfront in less than 5 minutes with 12 stops along the way. So they bring in a tram for the San Fernando waterfront. PNM didn't have that. Them boys jail, exhibition and event hall. Golden Grove Commons, mix or single family high-rise and townhouse units. So they go in and build townhouse units and single family units where the prison now resides. So I guess they're going and demolish the prison. As I said before, hillside and over-the-water private bungalows on Carrera Island. The same over-the-water private bungalows that they didn't want built in Tobago by no man's land. Do what that there. But we will put it on Carrera Island, right? Which currently houses a prison. We will tear that down and we will use Carrera Island to create hillside and overwater private bungalows. All right. You all know about Alcatraz in the United States, in New York, I think it is, which is a tourist attraction. A lot of people go to New York and they want to go across to see this famous prison. That was Alcatraz. We can't do that here. No. We're going to turn Carrera Island into the Isla Carrera Resort, 75-room boutique hotel with all amenities. You all ever went to Carrera Island? You pass by it? We have Nelson Island, which is a tourist attraction right now. Many of you perhaps haven't gone to it. But I can tell you, one of the main attractions to Nelson Island happens to be what we call the jailhouse, right? So Nelson Island is under the control and the responsibility of the National Trust. And whenever guests come down there, visitors come down, one of the main attractions they love to see is the jailhouse, where we still have the prisons. So I keep saying we have, not on the board anymore, where people like Rafiq Shah and Ifibo Wilkinson and these guys were housed during the 1970 insurrection and Black Power movement days when these guys were arrested, and put there. A lot of these cells, the same old bed that some of them slept on is still there. And then you have Butler's Cottage, where he was kept, right, for a time on Nelson Island. There's another room in the same jailhouse where you have pictures and memorabilia of Butler, pictures, newspaper articles and stuff of him, his funeral and so on, things that you don't normally see, right? So pictures of him in his coffin, all of these different things they have down there. That is one of the main attractions. But they want to turn, and one of the things that the National Trust, so oftentimes what happens is that the prisoners who are across on Carrera Island, sometimes they would come across and they would do work on Nelson Island, right? We had plans, well, I keep saying the National Trust had plans to build a walkway from Nelson Island across to one of the other islands there. Then you have Lenigan and the other islands that are there, the one on which Dr. Eric Williams would have had his honeymoon, I think it was. In fact, the trust was considering the incinerator that was used to cremate Dr. Williams, which I think is under the control of the CDA, but it's in really, really terrible shape right now. Something that should have been preserved, and it was offered to the trust to put it on the island and so on, but it would be a bit of a, so we say, yeah. But nonetheless, they want to turn the Carrera Island into a resort. For who? Who went and stay there? Not the average citizen. Okay. Cultural Center, Plaza San Carlos. Waterfront rejuvenation, again, revitalize food village for the enhanced local culinary experience. The same people who bad talk the fish fry in Caranage, waste of money, Rowley waste a set of money for a fish fry. The same people who shut down the Femme du Chalet, also known as the, what is call it, the breakfast shed that shut down the other day. Rather than you spend money to fix up that, improve it, right? You want rent, you want to collect rent, okay, nothing, no problem, nothing wrong with that. You didn't put nothing, you leave that there. I think 2 people came back. When you should be using that to promote local cuisine so that when the cruise ships come, people could come there and sit down and have a meal to taste Trinidad and Tobago cuisine. No announcement about fixing that up. Leave it as it is, in the rundown state that it is. We want to come and build something else. Where is it? Now, the Cultural Center. You all remember under Patrick Manning, when he proposed to build in the Queen's Park Savannah where the grandstand is now, right? The home of Carnival. And he wanted to build a permanent facility, a permanent structure called Carnival City, I think it was, where you would have had the roof could retract, right? And then the stage would be able to come out from under the ground and come up and stuff. So you could have all kind of, outside of Carnival, you could use the facility for other productions and so on, right? And the retracting roof would have been good, because oftentimes for Carnival, for those of you who go to the preliminary shows, King and Queen of the bands, well, King and Queen of Carnival and so on, preliminaries and semi-finals and such, you would see that it has happened on numerous occasions when the bigger costumes come on stage, and sometimes that breeze blowing in the night, and many times the costumes have toppled over. And in some cases, the masqueraders were injured, right? And that would have helped to prevent that. So it would have been an enclosed space, a big auditorium and stuff, so you could have had year-round use. So when they want to have all these big concerts with whoever come in, this reggae concert and all kind of thing, you would have had that facility there. The same UNC said it was a vanity project. We don't need that. Waste of money. Same UNC, but today they want to come and tell you about building a cultural center. 3,500 luxury waterfront units. Again, seamless fluid travel. 40-acre redevelopment of PTSC Citygate will integrate bus, maxi taxi, and terminals. Overseas activities from real-time intelligence gathering to strategic policy formation, the National Security Complex. 40-acre single unified functional national security campus. So we're going to put all the prisoners in the same place. Okay. So remember the last time they said that we ended up with the $88 million fence. 600,000 square feet. So I just want to say, right, we in the PNM, we are not against development at all. We are not against development, but well thought out development. The Vision 2030, 2020, now 2030 document wasn't just a PNM thing. It was something that was developed after Mr. Manning would have brought together some of the best minds in Trinidad and Tobago, regardless of political affiliation. People like Botiwari and all of them were part of that. Came together and they put together this well-considered structured document, which foresaw Trinidad and Tobago becoming a developed nation by 2020. And then were it not for that interruption in 2010, where it set back the country, right? And that development was interrupted and it had to be turned into the 2030 document, the 2030 development plan. But you need money. And so when people keep asking why the PNM didn't do it, where wanted the PNM to get the money from? You all seem to forget in 2014, 2015, when the price of oil started to fall. What the UNC did in 2015, January, when Kamla Persad-Bissessar came dressed in her black and red outfit looking like, let me not go there. And she announced, and she gave her famous State of the Economy address, which business leaders said was tall on how did they describe it, boy? It lacks substance, right? The Prime Minister, their words, failed to take the nation into her confidence. It was tall on rhetoric and short on substance. That's how they described it. And she announced that every government ministry was going to cut back on expenditure by 7%. Instructions were given to all ministries to cut expenditure by 7% because oil money started to fall, because the price of oil started to fall. So while they were enjoying over $100 per barrel for the majority of their time there, when the oil prices started to fall from June of 2014, and they said, don't worry, she and her then minister, the $11.625 million, Larry Hawaii, told us, don't worry. Don't concern yourselves. Trinidad and Tobago is a gas-based economy. So the price of oil falling, don't worry. And then they started to panic. And so when the PNM came in later on that year, and oil prices were falling even more, and in the early days of the PNM, when oil prices had fallen to some $20-something, and for a couple of days, the price of oil was in negative territory, so it was basically free. So no money was being generated. The PNM inherited a $6 billion debt, back pay debt, from the 14% that Prasad Bisesa had given to public servants, and put no money in place to pay them the back pay. And the PNM had to go and find that $6 billion, plus the additional funds for recurrent expenditure. And all the other projects that they had left behind, all of the loans that they took for the Aquatic Center and the Cuba Children's Hospital, and all of these loans for which payments started in 2018. And the PNM had to find the money to pay principal and interest on all of these loans and the other debts that the UNC had incurred. So they had no money. They didn't enjoy the kind of windfalls that Prasad Bisesa enjoyed for the majority of her first term as Prime Minister. So where do you all want them to get the money from? And we cussed him, but you increase the price of fuel once, twice, and we are riot yet, so you increase it a third time and then 5-6 times. Because 85 to 90% of the annual budget goes to wages and salaries, transfers and subsidies. All of a sudden now, UNC supporters understand the need for us to sacrifice and give back, and to help out the government to be able to realize their visionary goals and development for Trinidad and Tobago. COVID come and hit. The government didn't budget for that. When the budget was read in October of 2019, nobody foresaw that we were going to have something called COVID that would have cost the state billions of dollars, having to pay for vaccines, having to set up facilities for persons who were infected, having to provide income support, salary relief grants, and income support grants, and rental support grants, and all of these different things, having to put out money to give to NGOs and so on, and to churches and the like, so that they could purchase food hampers and put together food hampers for their members who had lost their jobs and who were struggling. All of these things, the government didn't anticipate that, but they had to find the money for that. And some of it came out of the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, and some of it would have been given in grants from outside. But again, the government wasn't enjoying the type of revenues. Kamala said it herself. Her administration had the highest energy revenues in the country's history. So where wanted the government to get the money from? And as I told you before, when they asked the private sector for help, when they asked the private sector to come on board, we're not interested. The UNC maligned the Sandals project with the assistance of the same media that they cussing today. Maligned the Sandals project, a set of misinformation and lies, and got a majority of the population to say, we don't want that. Because the government planning to spend a certain money, taxpayers' money, to build this thing, and then Sandals come in and take over, and they want to give concessions, and we want to know about the MOU and all of that. And then when they come here, because it's an all-inclusive resort, the people are not going to come out, and then Sandals going to import all of the stuff and the food. Where they get that from, nobody knows. It didn't even go into the negotiation stage. The committee that Wendell Motley was supposed to chair, that was supposed to enter in negotiations with Sandals, it never got to that stage. All they had was an MOU. Nothing concrete. But they come and tell you, this is what the PNM want to do, and that's what the PNM want to do. And they were ably assisted by their friends in Tobago, who maligned the project and got Gordon Butchtor to say, see me, all you're too damn political, and I don't need this. And you all tarnishing my brand. Further, that one of your daily newspapers would go so far as to resurrect a story that 2 years old about something that happened in a resort in the Bahamas to malign as a front page. Because we tell you what they are publishing is lies, we go on. We go in St. Vincent, where they will welcome us with open arms. And today St. Vincent is benefiting from that. Second resort being built, which will employ some 2,000 people. But they're promising you 50,000 jobs. They said 55,000, but we're giving you 50,000 jobs short term. Because when all of the construction finished, they're not concerned they're going to overheat the economy like Prasad Bisesa was concerned in 2007 to 2009. She's not concerned that they're going to crowd out the private sector. No, she's not concerned about that. So when all of the construction is finished, and all you who get construction work, where you are going to go and work afterwards? You're going to work in the hotel? In the boutiques? You're going on Isla Carrera to work? But we will revisit that on another day, because I'm running out of time, and as I said, I have an event I have to attend a little later. So The second story on today's newspaper. $440 million live sport ripoff. So live sport is once again in the news, and much to the chagrin of the supporters of the UNC, who vex. And already, as is to be expected, they start with but what about? And what about? What about the $2.6 billion that Ember thief? What about the $3 billion that Ember thief, that the Privy Council say Ember should be investigated? And what about? And what about what about Foster Cummins? And what about Kareem Marcel? And what about? This is the problem with UNC supporters. Corruption is only terrible when the PNM stands accused. But when their own stands accused, oh, no, that is a witch hunt. We don't mind. That happened 11 years ago. So forget about that. That is old news. We're not interested to hear about that. Not interested. But if this was about Manning and Calder Hart, or if they had resurrected a story about Las Alturas, which was older than this, oh yes, we want to hear. We want to hear. Rowley, when he was in school 40, 50 years ago as a teacher, 4 and 5 decades ago, and he was with some young girl and he got the girl pregnant. We want to talk about that. Yes, Rowley's a old pedophile. We don't care that is how many decades later. We will talk about that. Let me talk about O'Halloran and Privat. Yes, this is old news, 11 years ago, but we don't mind going back 40 and 50 years ago, where the men are now deceased, dead. Some of them are ashes. Dust in the wind, pushing up daisies decades now, but we will talk about that. But we don't want to talk about this. How convenient that all of a sudden this come back on the front page. And Mark Basante had nothing to do. But when Mark Basante did a 4-day story about Foster Cummins and a loan that he took from a credit union, oh, you all were glued to the TV and the newspaper. We want to hear the saucy details. You wanted to hear the other day about Rhoda Barrett and how Ember gave her $3.3 million in contract. And how much money she get from NLCB. We interested to hear that. We want to hear about how Foster Cummins and the $102 million. We want to hear about that. Yes. So they come back. And what about AV drilling? And what about? Always what about? But when this same reporter was doing stories on PNM people, they didn't hear PNM people coming on social media and talking about what about? And what about? David Lee get charged. What about? What about this one? And that is why I continue to say the supporters of the UNC are very dangerous people. They are willing to turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to corruption once it comes from their side. But the other side, the PNM created corruption, they invent corruption. Eric Williams' daughter, Erica, she had how much money she could have offered the government a loan to pay off all the debts. Where they get that from, I don't know. Oh, Williams thief how much money? What property Williams had when he died? Manning thief how much money? When Mr. Manning died, what did he have? What did he have? Let me touch on this quickly in the interest of time. I need to wrap up in about half an hour. And and I think this is going to run for a few weeks. Right? A full 2 page. If you didn't get your Express, get it. Let's touch on it for a bit, and we will be exploring this. 11 years after the live sport program was aborted amid allegations of corruption, a confidential police dossier and a sworn suspect witness statement has surfaced, exposing a movie-like scene of a conspiracy to rob the state of millions of taxpayers' dollars. And when I saw this morning, the first thing I did, I decided to go on the Facebook page of Mr. Doubles and Coffee, Mr. Douglas Politics, to hear what he has to say, because you expect that with a story like this breaking, he would try to find something to distract. And sure enough, he didn't disappoint. He come this morning to talk about Faris Al-Rawi and how some property that was residential property was being rented for commercial rates and PNM corruption and all of that, to try and deflect from this story. And I want to tell the supporters of the UNC who keep talking nonsense about the court exonerated Anil Roberts with respect to the live sport report. Absolute rubbish. The court was never invited to speak on or to opine on any matter with regards to the substance of the live sport report. What you had was the former permanent secretary in the Ministry of Sports under Anil Roberts, Mr. Ashwin Creed, and another gentleman whose name skips me at the moment. Both complained that they were not afforded an opportunity to respond to the adverse findings in the report that was made against them. Because in the interest of natural justice, if you conduct an investigation and you find things about a person, you should give that person an opportunity to respond to these findings, rather than publish a report that pronounces guilt and the person didn't have an opportunity to say, well, this is not true, that is not true, this is what actually happened. I can present documents to show that this is not factual and that this is incorrect. Ashwin Creed said he was not afforded the opportunity to do that. And so therefore he was denied natural justice. He took the state to court and the court found Mr. Creed has a case. That what you should have done after you did and you gathered all of this information and all of this evidence, if you want to call it that, you were supposed to meet with him and the other gentleman and to interrogate them, present them with your findings so that they could give explanation if possible, so as to make sure that the report was fair, and that was not done. And the court said, go and do over the report, and this time give Mr. Creed an opportunity to say his piece. The court never said that what this report says with respect to corruption and so on, that is not true. That never happened because the court was not invited to do that. It did not reach to that stage. Nobody was charged. When somebody is charged and they come before the court, then the court will be asked to make a determination based on that. It never reached there. And as we would have heard earlier on this year, that the live sport report and some other reports were shelved, collecting dust. The police, for some whatever reason, right? Remember Kate Mahon, who Rudal Munila loves to talk about, who would have investigated into the EMPD and all of these things and was waiting for warrants from the police to be able to go and conduct further investigations. And for some reason, the police was dragging their feet to secure these warrants. And these things were shelved. Remember that? So it says here, and this week's version speaks about Mr. Adolphus Daniel, the $34 million man, who we now learn based on today's report, that it really was, while it was 34 million he received, it was supposed to be 42, because there was an additional 8 million that he requested. But he didn't get that 8 million because apparently when things started to go sour and he decided to hightail it, so to speak, and that $8 million was left behind. And so, not wanting to waste it since the ministry had already approved it, that $8 million, according to this report, was shared up amongst other people. So it goes on to say, for years, Ruth Marchand worked quietly inside the Ministry of Sport, part of a small team responsible for overseeing the Mega Life Sport program, a government project hailed then as a lifeline for young men stuck in a cycle of crime and poverty. Behind the media releases and amid the community hype, Marchand claims she saw something entirely different. A system rotted from within, with money flowing without accountability and political connections dictating who profited. A total of $440,666,381 of cabinet and budgetary allocations for the Life Sport program disappeared from the nation's coffers, according to a police document. Marchand alleged in her 65-page notarized statement taken in July of 2021, contracts were manipulated, figures were changed, and procedures were circumvented in order to siphon millions of dollars into the hands of the connected and the corrupt. Investigators say the statement exposed a deep, organized conspiracy that reached far beyond the ministry's doors, involving key players who acted under the pretext of national service while enriching themselves through deception. Today, one of those persons is sitting on the board of TTT. He who was contracted at a cost of $92,000 a month to produce booklets or pamphlets and so on, to go and talk to the participants in the program to get them to say good things about this program, $92,000 a month. And then another man who is now a minister in the Ministry of Housing, when he see that, he decide, well, hey, money sharing, let me try and see if I can get in on the thing too. And he decided to come up with a program called Equal Time, a television program on what is now TTT, where between 6 and 7 every night he would host this program and invite disgraced ministers who were discredited, who were fired, to bring them on the program as guests and to talk about what went on. And the first guest that he was proposing was none other than the live sport man, Anil Roberts. And what did he say in the leaked email between himself and Rudal Munilal, to whom he made the pitch? was that you would get Mr. Roberts to admit that he was in fact the man in the room 201, and that was on his private time, and it had nothing to do with government and so on. And if it caused the government any embarrassment, that he apologizes and so on, and he takes ownership of it to show that this is a serious government that is interested in transparency. Unfortunately, they lost office before, and then when the leaked email came out, well, that put a spoke in that. Today, he's earning over $70,000 a month as a minister in the Ministry of Housing, doing absolutely nothing other than maligning and cussing the PNM on social media. We continue. Marchand worked at the Ministry of Sport during the period 2009 to 2014 as acting assistant director of physical education and sports, and also a member of the Live Sports Implementation Committee. She dealt with internal records, budgets, letters that demonstrated how far the rot had grown. She watched as contracts were expedited, figures were surreptitiously changed, and oversight committees conveniently disbanded. Reminds me of the interministerial committee that they had for the Piarco Airport. Remember when Jolene John became Minister of Works, Mr. Pandey, and appointed by Mr. Pandey, and when she went to the first interministerial meeting, and she said the greed was palpable. It was sickening. She never went back to another meeting. Just what she heard in that one meeting alone was enough to turn her stomach and cause her to go to Mr. Pandey and tell him, we have a problem. You have a set of greedy people inside there. Eat our food. This thing out of hand. And what was Pandey's response according to Jolene John in the Commission of Inquiry? He said to her, I am aware. It is a milch cow, a feeding frenzy. Seems this was part 2. Her breaking point came when she was told to conceal information from both the ministry's legal staff and the committee itself, as well as to change financial data to account for a contractor's multi-million-dollar payment. In her statement, Marchand detailed how the web of corruption began to unfold, starting with contractor Adolphus Daniel, the man behind eBeam Interact Limited. Starting with him. Daniel secured a $34 million payment for a live sport education component that investigators say was never delivered. He passed away in March of 2021, 4 months before Marchand gave her statement to authorities. Daniel made it clear when he was alive that the $34 million was his to keep. However, last year, Sport TT won a judgment of $30 million against Daniel's company, eBeam Interact Limited. And the man who was the chairman of Sport TT at that time, Mr. Paddington, apparently, as we saw, he was at the Prime Minister's residence on Thursday for the launch of this revitalization project. And he got big work, it seems, in Udicott. But we will come back to that on another day. So we bring back all of the old players, despite the fact that the court ruled on a judgment against this man and other board members of Sport TT who oversaw the live sport. And all of them are being made to pay our money. But we bring him back. Meanwhile, the man who was the minister at the time, with the UNC trying to defend, he's sitting as a minister in the Ministry of Housing and trying to distract by talking foolishness this morning. According to Marchand, Daniel walked away with the largest single payout under the live sport program, an estimated $34 million for work that he never did. Not a stick of chalk, not a blackboard, not a duster, not a paperclip. It all began back in September 2012 when Daniel pitched a math, English, and technology component to then Permanent Secretary Ashwin Creed, hoping to have it included as part of the live sport initiative. Who tell he to do that? He just sit down home and hear about, the people didn't even know about live sport yet. But all of a sudden, Mr. Daniel was able to secure an appointment with the Permanent Secretary, then Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Sport, to come and pitch this idea. Daniel, the owner of eBeam Interact Limited, said it would transform how at-risk youth were educated under the live sport program. At the time, the program was designed for so-called hotspot communities, a 3-tiered initiative meant to focus on sport training, occupational skills, and job placement for at-risk youth. Marchand said Daniel was involved in the live sport program in a very significant way and was later allowed to attend meetings on the implementation committee that took place in late 2012. She claimed he imposed himself on the members and controlled everything that was taking place. When I heard Daniel speak, I was of the belief that he had an agenda and other official named for reasons unknown to me. Gave him the opportunity to explore and fulfill that agenda. Whatever it was a well-kept secret. Who is this official whose name is not mentioned in this article and is referred to as other official name call, who gave Mr. Daniel all that power. It has to be somebody high up, right? Such that when Mr. Daniel come, everybody else know, hey, this man has authority given to him by so-and-so, so what he say goes. And there's only certain people could have given him that authority. I wonder who that person might be. I wonder why. She goes on to say, according to Marchand, Daniel requested that he become the project's lead consultant, and that this position was supported by a senior official. And despite the fact that Forbes Prasad was the chairman of the implementation committee, members were required to keep Daniel up to date on everything going on in the program. Marchand, however, said the component Daniel zeroed in on was the math and English. Marchand stated the component remained math and English, but Daniel changed the figures on the proposal from 22 million to cover the 2 years of the contract to 34 million to cover the same 2 years. Within the space of 1 month, Daniel copied a lot of the information from his proposal directly onto the contract, and while he increased the cost from 22 million to 34 million, the scope of work did not change. So in other words, he was allowed to write his own contract. I am not involved in contracts and so on, right? So I don't have any experience in that. So I'm asking, is that the norm? That you could come to the ministry, make a proposal, and the ministry say, well, all right, well, you drop your own contract, your terms, your warranties, whatever it is you want, how much you want, and just bring it for us, and we will rubber stamp it and pay you now. That's how it works. So this man was flouting a level of authority that was given to him from higher up. According to Marchand, while Daniel advised the implementation committee on live sport matters, he quietly kept his own company's involvement a secret. I wonder why. Marchand, who handled the program's internal documentation, told investigators she was instructed to keep the eBeam contract hidden from the live sport implementation committee and to change critical budget figures to make the deal financially viable. Even the ministry's legal department, she claimed, was kept in the dark. Everything to do with Daniel's contract happened in a triangular situation. I had to shield the eBeam contract from the implementation committee so that certain things would not be brought to the attention of the implementation committee, she claimed. Marchand says she was instructed by her seniors to locate a standard contract template from the Ministry of Sport and guide Daniel on how to frame his own agreement, effectively allowing the contractor to draft the terms of his own multi-million-dollar deal. And it was like the blind leading the blind. And while we were working on things surrounding the eBeam contract, Forbes Prasad and the other members of the implementation committee were working with a budget that speaks to vocational skills and not technology, maths, and English, she said. Marchand said the implementation committee was later notified by a senior official that they were no longer going with vocational skills, but rather technology, maths, and English. So we weren't interested in that before. But that is what Mr. Adolphus Daniel wanted, because that's what he's offering. And then all of a sudden, we get notification, hey, we are abandoning the vocational skills. So you know the thing, teaching these young men how a trade, plumbing, construction, things like that. Show them how to read a plan, the blueprints, all of these different things. We were going on that road, teaching them skills that they could go and implement right away to get employed, start their own business. No, we're not interested in that no more. We're changing now, and we're going to offer them maths and English and technology. Marchand said when all was done, Daniel subsequently collected the entire sum of 34 million for his contract and did not provide the services stated. This money was paid to Daniel in two parts of $17 million each. She said when questioned by investigators, she was shown a contract between Sports Company of Trinidad and Tobago and eBeam Interact Limited, dated December 6, 2012, for the contracted price of 34 million. She told the investigator, Inspector Thomas, I have examined the contract, and what I can see is that I am certain that on that date, there wasn't any contract for services between SportTT and eBeam. Backdating. You all remember the contract mill that was found in an office at the head office of, what was it, the EFCL at the time, where 3 individuals were found in a back room, backdating contracts for a variety of different services that had been offered to the then People's Partnership Administration, contracts for which contractors had already been paid. They were paid absent contracts, and now the contracts are now being done up to provide to the contractors so they could come now and present themselves for second payment, saying, well, I have this contract, we do the work and we didn't get paid. Because apparently there was no contract before. So man get paid, but no records. And now we will give you the contract to come to the PNM administration to say, well, look, I have a contract, I did the work, and I come to get paid with my money. Marchand said, although Daniel worked with the contract draft daily, like a purse whenever he came to the office, the final draft of that contract was done either by Daniel's name called, they didn't say, sometime in May 2013, and the contract was signed about a day or two before the first payment of 17 million was made to Daniel, and at the same timing with the release from the Ministry to Finance to the bank. So he came with a contract in 2013 that was signed, according to her, sometime in May of 2013 with a date of December 6th, 2012. Okay. But Daniel wasn't done there. Marchand said in June of 2013, after Daniel had received the first tranche of 17 million, he asked her to include an additional $8 million for the technology component. Remember, once you do a note that was approved for a certain amount and you refer to a contract, the contract is already sealed once you sign. The problem is, because he had already signed and received the first tranche, he could not get an increase. So he tried a last-minute tactic to get an extra $8 million his way. Remember, from the inception, the role between Daniel and I was flexible to the point that they allowed him total control. So if he comes and tells me to put in a technology component for 8 million, my job is to shut up and put it. That is how it felt like, and that is how it worked. Marchand further stated, I didn't do a proposal or anything for the technology component, as was the protocol as I outlined before. I simply inserted this $8 million technology component into the budget backdoor. Marchand said the cabinet note was manipulated to ensure funding not only for Daniel, but also for any other ad hoc requests that came through LiveSport for the period from 2012 to when the program started to 2014. Now remember, it's cabinet note. Who takes the cabinet note to cabinet? Ask a silly question. The minister responsible for that ministry. And here it is, Ruth Marchand is telling us the cabinet note was manipulated to ensure funding not only for Daniel, but also for any other ad hoc request that came through LiveSport for the period from 2012 when the program started to 2014. So is she saying that the minister took a manipulated cabinet note to cabinet to get money? He didn't know. She admitted in her statement that in regards to LiveSport, many additions were made. However, no one noted the change and no one queried anything. So the money was approved. At this time, there were many additions to the LiveSport program. Most of these changes did not go to cabinet or anything. She said the cabinet note had been breached with regard to the administrative structure. Marchand further stated the 8 million added was merely a change to the budget and that no addendum to the budget was done. She added no other supporting documents or anything was submitted to support this increase. So when Daniel was paid, there was an additional $8 million just lingering in the system. $8 million. Marchand revealed to authorities that the Central Audit Committee was going to recommend that Daniel repay the money he had received from the EBM contract, as he had failed to fulfill two parts of his contract. She said she believed Daniel forgot about the 8 million and had disappeared from the ministry for months. She said she believed it was prompted by an incident that occurred in August 2013 in which Daniel chaired a coordinators meeting at the stadium. Here it is. According to Marchand, at this time, the gangs were complaining about Daniel and saying that they didn't want any maths or English component in the program. Daniel felt threatened by this. We were also at war with Daniel for receiving money and delaying the start of the component of the program. At that meeting in the stadium, things got heated, and a leader of the Rasta City gang got up and slapped Daniel. Daniel came to my office, told me what happened, and accused me of conspiring with the gangs to beat him. He even pulled a gun on me based on this and threatened to shoot me. I never reported this incident to the police. Marchand said Daniel was later instructed by the higher-ups in the Ministry of Sport that he should no longer chair any meetings that didn't concern his aspect of LiveSport. She said he later went dark. Marchand said it was around that time that Daniel disappeared, that the Ministry of Finance released the $8 million for the technology component. She stated that with Daniel gone, a decision was taken to split the money among several people and not leave any trail behind. In the interest of time, because this is a developing story, and just to read this here, right? Before I depart for today. Express article dated July 26, 2014. It was Anil. 34 million for no work in live sport. Hawaii. Sport Minister brought Daniel to the Ministry of Finance. Finance Minister Larry Hawaii says it was Sports Minister Anil Roberts who brought Adolphus Daniel, the educator who was paid $34 million from the live sport program for no work to his ministry. Mr. Daniel was brought by Minister Roberts and officers of the Ministry of Sport to meet with the Ministry of Finance to demonstrate how the program would work. After the demonstration, nothing further was heard about this initiative as far as I am aware, said Hawaii in an email response to questions from the Express. The minister was responding to questions on why Daniel was solely selected for the project and whether Daniel's $34 million contract was sent to cabinet for approval, given the quantum of it. The particular contract was approved by the Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago, not by the ministry. State enterprises can and do enter into contracts without cabinet approval. And as far as I can recall, cabinet would not have been aware of this contract at the time that it was approved. The Ministry of Sport proceeded with it through the Sport Company rather than through the Ministry of Sport itself, Hawaii explained. The audit commissioned by Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar into live sport had revealed that Daniel's company eBeam Interact was paid $34 million, but no work was ever executed. The audit noted it is obvious Sport TT was a part of this contract mainly because the contract was above the authorized limit of the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Sport. And it is evident that the mind and management of this contract has always been and continues to be the Ministry of Sport. The contract was drafted by the Ministry of Sport Legal, and all the conditions necessary to satisfy the readiness of the centers for the start of numeracy and literacy component were always the responsibility of the Ministry of Sport. Who was in charge of the Ministry of Sport? If he's going to do a doubles and coffee on this, you think he's going to do a Douglas politics? Stay tuned to his Facebook page to see what he says, because this is an ongoing story. They said part 2 will come next Sunday, where we will hear about the $8 million split and who got that $8 million. Stay tuned to CCN TV6 tomorrow at 7 p.m. for a TV version of part 1. So that is that tomorrow? Tomorrow night? Or is that tonight? Tomorrow night. Take a look at it. Right? So they always talk about the PNM was funding the gangs, but according to this, who was involved with the gangs? Who was involved with the gang? PNM had nothing to do with live sport. But this is a developing story. And I'm sure they will touch on the relationship that Mr. Adolphus Daniel had with the Roberts family, that in fact Mr. Roberts' father was Adolphus Daniel's lawyer, long before Mr. Roberts became the Minister of Sport. And we will read all of those articles in time to come. Right? Just putting this out there. And the supporters of the UNC will fight this and tell you, and Mark Bassant. When Mark Bassant was dealing with Foster, they love him. Mark is the best thing since sliced bread. Now we're talking live sport. We don't want to hear that. Mark need to leave that alone. Just like when the matter, well, I would hope, since they want to talk about what about, I hope Mark revisits those checks with respect to Mr. Padarath. The 2 checks that he issued to Mrs. Persad-Bissessar for $135,000, that he can't remember what that was for, but she could remember. He is half her age, but her memory better than his. Can't remember what it was for. All the monies that he get. He and Mommy opened a business in 2011 and got over $17 million in contracts, according to what the findings of Mr. Bassant. But when the UNC talking about what if and what about, no mention about what about that. Don't want to hear about that. Well, the rest of us want to hear about it. And all the things that we didn't know about live sport, we will hear about. very soon. So stay tuned to TV6 for those of you who don't watch it. Let me see here, boy. Let me see. See here, boy. Seeing some people like fighting in my chat here. Yes. So if you didn't get a copy of the Express, folks, if you don't normally buy the Express, I suggest you do. Yeah, we deliver the facts today that they don't want. This is a developing story. And I have plenty more stories. I will find the other article. I don't have the time to read it today. So maybe next week, God's willing, we will delve into that, which talks about how the contract moved from $6 million to $34 million. How Mr. Daniel would have drafted his own contract. We would read about the relationship between Mr. Daniel and the Roberts family, the link. We'll read about, and I suppose we'll hear about here, how Mr. Daniel would have received that contract sole select. So nobody else was invited to tender. There were no other educational institutions in this country who were asked to submit a proposal to offer training in math and English or, and technology. For some reason, they choose Mr. Daniel alone. Sole select. Something like that could have gone out for tender because this is not some emergency work that needed to be done. So you could have invited other tenders, asked other people to submit, we evaluate and determine who is best or who could deliver this curriculum the best. That didn't happen. They say, Adolphus, we have a proposal here, we're going with this. We no need to invite anybody else. He get through, $34 million, nothing was ever done. And he said he keep any money because it's not his fault. The ministry was supposed to develop the centers were not done, and he did his part. He developed the curriculum. It's not his fault that it couldn't be. They say he had to pay back the money, but he's deceased. Was the money repaid? I don't know. Can the state compel his estate to repay the money? They say I had to pay back 30 out of the 34. But no follow-up on that as to see what is happening. But anyway. Yes, Nicola, the one and the same Daniel. State X4 is saying each school could have been mandated to offer after-school studies in some way, either by themselves or together with other schools. Why reinvent the wheel? I agree with you. I am right thinking. Trini says we need more trustworthy activists to spread the messages. Bad UNC do. We need a reality tracking meter to share with the public, or else we are doomed. I agree with you. And the UNC seems to be very good at spreading the propaganda. And don't worry, in the course of this coming week, I'm sure they're going to come up with ways and means to distract. Because after the story is aired tomorrow night on TV6, right, and it's going to become a talking point, they're going to find something to be able to distract from that. And I suppose that is why TV6 has decided, rather than to run it as they did with Foster Cummings, to run it all 4 parts in 1 week, night after night. If you want to keep it on the front burner, keep it relevant so that any distractions that come would not impact. So even if they come into a distraction this week, when part 2 comes out next weekend, every week until this series ends, they're going to have to come up with a different distraction to take away from that being the conversation. And in any other jurisdiction, the man who was the Minister of Sport then and who is today a government minister would have either resigned or would have been dismissed. But the current Prime Minister put her own self in this situation because she didn't have to bring him back. He serves no useful purpose where he is right now. But because he is an attack dog, one of her toothless potongs who can do and see what she can't, he serves a purpose. All right? So he getting paid $70,000 to come and do doubles and coffee to tell you about Red Couch and who Dr. Rowley had on Red Couch and Faris and Stuart Young genitals and Faris pants tight and Nian Gatsby Dolly hairstyle. All kind of, this is what you paying $70,000 per someone for. That's what you paying it for. Right? Give a man a work so he can lick up the opposition on social media. And he has a following. And the supporters will send out all of this foolishness and share it many times, many times, because they're easily distracted. Corruption bad under the UN, under the PNM, it's horrible, intolerable. Under the UNC, what about? We don't talk about this. Forget that. We talk about David Lee now. David Lee is still recent. You want to talk about that because the DPP is PNM. Folks, as I said, I have to leave a little early today. Sorry, I couldn't stay longer to delve more into this, but it's an ongoing story, and we will continue to follow up on it. But I said, check out TV6 tomorrow night, part 1. Someone says Santa Kamala was and still is the PM in charge of the country. Yes, she is. I don't know, but I don't think she would do that again. You recall in her first year, I think it was, second year as Prime Minister, where they had the billboards around the country with her wishing the country a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, $60,000. And Basan Barrett said, yeah, that's what they're fussing for, small money, man. Just look at the gesture, the Prime Minister wants to greet everybody. So you're driving on the highway and a big billboard with the Prime Minister's face, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, blah, 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 and all of that. $60,000. I don't think they're going to go down that road again. But to the CPEP and URP workers who were hoping that phase two of the National Employment Program would have had something for you, unfortunately, you've been left disappointed. This isn't for you, right? This is not for you. Unless when and if construction starts, you might be able to get a little construction work. But otherwise, that is not for you. When Dr. Rowley said there is nothing wrong with the rich getting richer, but the poor must come out of poverty, that when the rich get richer, they create opportunities for the poor. They cuss him and they rake him over the coals. But your government, who rake him and cuss him over the rake him over the coals and cuss him out for saying that, is not providing this revitalization blueprint for who to get richer, not the poor. Because I didn't see any CPEP and URP workers sitting in the crowd on Thursday. They didn't get any invitations. Maybe it has some ghosts floating around, the URP ghosts. Can't see them. But I saw no CPEP workers there. I didn't see any forestry workers there sit down in this suit and tie, taking in this thing. And when it's supposed to be for their benefit, remember that's what they say? Tanku said it will blow your mind what this government is going to do to create employment. So while the CPEP workers have to watch it on social media and thinking, well, yeah, they say phase 2, so phase 2 is for us. No, nothing for them. So go and see if you could get work in the meantime until construction start, and you might be able to get a little something. Because as I said, they've not mentioned any phase 3, so it looks like it's just phase 1 and 2, and that is it. So if you don't have no money, and you can't, and right now I think they opened some facility, some desk somewhere, I don't know if it's in the Hyatt or somewhere. So if you're a contractor, you have money, and you want to bid for one of these projects, you could go down there and fill out your name and your information expressing interest in which are the projects you're interested in, and somebody will reach out to you and have a discussion and so on. All right? But phase 1 and phase 2 have been announced, and contrary to what we were told by Mr. Tanku, that the Prime Minister would announce this great thing that would help the CPEP and URP and forestry workers, nothing for them. Negi. But yellow is the code, and when UNC wins, the 1% wins. All of them who were there and who now singing the Prime Minister's praises, they win again. But I remind you all, as I leave, when Dr. Rowley approached the same 1%, in whose back pocket he was supposed to be, in whose back pocket the PNM was supposed to be, them say, no, we're not interested. We don't want to invest in your project. But they find Prasad Bissasa's proposal intriguing. They didn't say that they're going to invest, but let's just say their outlook of what she is proposing is far more positive than what it was for Dr. Rowley and the PNM. And they were planning to build all of these things, all of these grandiose things, taking it in bite sizes. So who really in the back pocket of the 1%? Who really making the rich richer? Just remember, when they gave out lands in Chagaramas 2010 to 2015, as late as the 1 month before the general election, and they gave out leases for lands in Chagaramas, Take a drive down Shagaramas and you will see. All these things that they're telling you, all this development that will help the country. When you go down to Shagaramas, just as you swing by, before you take the bend to go around by Scallywag Bay and all of that. You see all those things there? The bar that was supposed to be there and the little kayak area and all of these things. Where is it now? Is it functional? All of that was supposed to make the Western Peninsula an attraction. All those things. What is the condition of them now? Other than the water park and other than the boardwalk, all the other stuff around that area there, what going on with it? Money spent. Leases were given out. Private sector spending money. And today, it's defunct. Go lower down by where the cove used to be down there, by Chaka Cabana. You have all of these cabanas right there. Are they occupied? All of these waterfront residences. Are they occupied? But we want to come and build more. So what we currently have, unoccupied, unused. But somebody say it's a good idea to come and build more. Go down to, what's the name? Renaissance. You know the 2 towers down in by Carenage down there that were built by the same 1% at the UNC Malign? Guess what? Those 2 towers, they have available units, plenty money, waterfront. For the longest while, some of these units there for sale, some of them for rent, no takers, but they convinced they will come and build similar residences, and for somehow, some reason, buyers will just show up by the hundreds and the thousands with their millions of dollars ready to buy after the private sector spend the money. The private sector, yeah, they just have money sit around waiting to waste. But they didn't have it for the PNM, but they have it for the UNC. But the PNM was the 1%, the PNM was 41%. I'll tell you one thing, I never see Kid Rowley host a single event at the Diplomatic Center, 41%. I never see Dr. Rowley in no picture stand up with anybody from the 1% dressed in bright red ties and him giving any explanation and he animated. At no point in time did I ever see that. Maybe the media wasn't interested. Maybe it happened and the media wasn't interested. I didn't see it. I'm sure plenty of didn't see it either. In 6 months, the amount of events that they have had at the Diplomatic Center, that when they came in 6 months ago, they told us it was in a terrible state, dilapidated, uninhabitable, unusable. Right? The scanner not working, place in a mess. The Prime Minister cannot use here. She can't use Whitehall because Whitehall in a mess. And all of a sudden now, every 2 weeks, they have events at the Diplomatic Center. It's not unusable anymore. It's no longer in a state of disrepair. Right? And I'm sure with all those people who turned up there was refreshments. There would have been food served, I'm certain. There would, because remember, we have to mingle and talk and we have to walk the room and get a feel from some of these bankers and financiers and, as Julian John said, captains of industry. When she was asked where the money going to come from, she said, you see who is in this room? Businessmen, bankers, captains of industry. This is where the money resides. They're going to finance it. So obviously, we had refreshments to facilitate, because we don't want them to just come, watch the presentation and leave. We want them to talk to each other, interact, share their views, influence. So almost like you would have had food and you would have had drink. Alcohol. I wonder where it come from. I wonder if it's the same alcohol that Pararat pushed out in the trolley. They say, look how much alcohol we found in the residence. Look how much alcohol was left here. You put it to use. Any of it still left? With all the events that you all have had there? $50 million they put out. They gave Rowley for entertainment under the office of the Prime Minister. How many events did Dr. Rowley have between October last year and March when he left as Prime Minister? How many? How many events to the UNC supporters? How many events did he have to spend $50 million? But look at how many events your political leader, your Prime Minister has had in the last 6 months in the same Diplomatic Center. Right? All of these under the auspices of the office of the Prime Minister. I wonder how much money spent from when Modi came to this event. Food and drink galore. But well, I have nothing to say about that. but 50 million for Rowley to entertain. And if Rowley had one event or two events, something for Diwali last year and something for Christmas, and that was it. That was it. But all is concerned about how much money he was going to spend. You're jokey, yes? Folks, we will chat again soon. All right? Let me see. Someone is asking, Andre Gaskin is asking, maybe the so-called 1% don't want poor people to benefit from anything at all. I tell you, what is being proposed here is not for poor people. Right? None of those things poor people could afford. Because those housings, those houses that they build in, those residences, poor people cannot afford that. These are $1 million apartments, $1 million residences. So we know who that is for, not for poor people. And when you're talking all kind of boutique hotel and resort and Carrera Island, poor people can't afford that. Some of them can't even afford to spend a night in a beach house up Toko or Manzanilla or Mayaro or something. Far less to go down to any resort. So again, all of these things that they're building, all of these conference centers and so on, CPF workers go in there, former URP workers go in there for what? They get invited to any conference? Unless the government having something to tell them, well, we decide to create a program to benefit you all, they're not going there. So none of these things that they propose in here, this 400-acre port region, well, the 6 mathematically designed ballrooms, what are they going there for? 600 square feet of office space to house premier financial districts surrounded by 300,000 square feet of high-end retail space. Who that for? The only thing here that might benefit the poor people is the National Security Complex, 40-acre single unified functional national security campus where they will be housing the prison, the one prison in the country. Well, we had two because they had the Tobago prison. That might be the only thing to benefit them. Because when they get to their wits' end and they could no longer afford to sustain themselves and their families and they have to go and shoplift, to steal cans of Enfamil like we saw the gentleman the other day, right? And to steal cheese and chicken and so on and corned beef or whatever it is, rice and whatnot to try and go home and cook a meal, and they get caught and they are sentenced to simple imprisonment. That might be the only facility being constructed here that they could benefit from. I wouldn't even say benefit. Nothing else. So they will get first time to see inside what the facility looks like. PF Cutter says, do not forget what Stuart Young said about the 1 billion drawn down from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund in 6 months and no idea what that's spent on. Exactly. The same UNC supporters who used to be complaining about the last PNM administration raiding the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. That's all they used to talk about. They could tell you dates and times and how much the PNM drew each occasion. This was brought out. No discussion, no conversation about that. Right? No conversation. And all of the men and women of letters and the so-called armchair analysts who would have had plenty to say about that. Nothing. I listened to I-95 on Friday and Mariano Brown was speaking and the issue came up and I heard him say, talking about that same issue. Talking about he don't know. And he heard of the former minister, the former prime minister make mention of it, but he will reserve comment on that because he has no idea what it was for and whatnot. And if you don't know, the rest of the country don't know. And this government that claims that they're going to be transparent have not responded. Because if what Stuart said was a lie, they would have come out and said it was a lie. Tanku would have put out a press release from the Ministry of Finance saying that former Prime Minister Stuart Young is telling untruths, right, that this did not happen and he don't know where he get that information from. The fact that they have not addressed it, the fact that no press release has come out denying it, to me, speaks volumes. And when the media tried to contact them to ask about it, nobody responded. And the media will call you, they will send you WhatsApp messages, so they're well aware why the media. And if it was a lie, to quell that, they would have put out a statement already, or they would have given a response to the journalists to publish it. That has not been done. All right? They stopped the Monday Night Forum meeting. Use it to come and inform the people of what you all are doing now. Since most of the ministers didn't talk in the budget, but come and have your Monday Night Forum and let the ministers come and speak there and account to the people as to how they're going to spend the money that they were allocated. That's and all they ain't doing. But they're transparent, and that is the best government ever. Yellow is the code, and when UNC wins. Where are the winners? Any of the winners here? I see all there. Okay. We will try to get sued, folks. Yes, Dish, 856 watching. So true. Thank you all so much for who have stayed on. All right. And I would have stayed on longer, but for the fact that, as I said, I have an event to attend in my capacity as Member of Parliament, and I'm headed there now. All right. So who knows? We'll see how things go. All right. If more developments, if they try to commit any China distraction, we will talk. Fearless Warrior. Most welcome, Glenda. Arlene Lewis, thank you so much. You're most welcome as well. Anon. Well, we will, and Brian, we will try to find out what that $1 billion was for. What we do know is that the country's foreign reserves fell by $600 million in less than 6 months since this administration has came into power. It took, under the PNM, it took 22 months for the country's foreign reserves to fall by 600 million. 22 months. Under them, it took 6 months. Just putting that out there. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday, folks. Keep safe. If you haven't gotten a copy of the Express and you're inclined, get a copy. This is a keepsake. Stay tuned over the course of the next few weeks as the files bust. And they like hotbacks. Well, we're going to get hotbacks for the course of the next few weeks, and we will discuss it here. All right, so take care. PF Cutter says, thank you kindly for the tireless work for your constituents and the people of TNT at large. You're most welcome. And Anaya says they could only try to find out, the UNC famous for not answering the opposition. Exactly. We will pose the question in the parliament, and they will refuse to answer because he says it's not in the public interest to know. But they're transparent. Bye, folks.